Australia has become the first country to ban tobacco companies from using any advertising or branding on cigarette packets. The rules are the most stringent in the world, and only pictures showing the damage smoking can cause to people's health are now allowed on the packets. A word of warning then, Duncan Kennedy's report contains some shocking images.
Any colour you like, as long as it's green. This is the future for smokers in Australia. Plain packaging where one brand is now barely distinguishable from another. Australia's 3 million smokers will now be deprived of their favourite colour-coded brands. There are 35,000 outlets across Australia where you can buy cigarettes, but from now they'll all come in this plain drab green packaging. In the world first, gone are the colours and the logos of the tobacco companies.
Once you take all of that colour coding and the imagery away and everything's standardised with massive health warnings, you really do de-glamorise a product, and you even go as far as denormalising smoking.
A clean cigarette, but kind to your throat.
This was how cigarettes used to be sold. Cigarette packs became the last advertising platform for tobacco companies. That's why they fought so hard against plain packaging in the courts, on grounds that logos are protected property and cigarettes are legal.
There's some serious unintended consequences that will flow on from plain packaging, including the growth in the illegal tobacco market, including the reduction of legal tobacco prices.
But as Australia now packs away its old packets, other countries like Britain and India are gearing up their campaigns to take on tobacco companies in the battle of the cigarette box. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News in Sydney.
Well, joining me in the studio now is the Australian freelance journalist Michael Dodd, who's done a lot of work with quit smoking charities, and Robert West, Professor of Health Psychology and Director of Tobacco Studies at University College London. Thank you to you both. Michael, we should start with you because you're an Australian. Why do you think it's Australia that's done this first?
Well, Australians, I think we're pretty outdoorsy, and there was a time we were even good at sport, but we certainly take sport seriously. And so the anti-smoking lobby in Australia is very strong. People are pretty direct in Australia, and so...
and very health conscious as well.
They are.
Australians led the way on skin cancer scares as well and how to protect yourself from that.
Yeah, I remember doing an interview in Canberra when I was a political reporter there, this is back in the 1980s, and there was this West Australian MP, Ron Edwards, who used to fly over from Perth to Canberra, which was a long flight, and he was outraged by the people smoking on the plane, and he said, I'm going to campaign to stop this, and he was very successful. We kind of led the way on that, and so it's only natural that we're leading the way on packaging as well.
Professor West, let's look at the actual evidence, if there is any, that packaging does play a role in people being attracted to smoking and addicted to smoking.
Yeah, well, sometimes psychologists are accused of doing studies that show the bleeding obvious, as it were. But when you come to something like this, it really is obvious when you look at the packaging. You know, what is the packaging for? It is there to make a product attractive. And then all you're doing with the plain packaging is to take away the opportunity that the tobacco industry has to create that kind of marketing. So it's not really so much about deterring smokers who are already smokers. They know the kind of cigarettes that they like and that they're addicted to. It's there because there is good evidence that young people who the tobacco industry needs to attract into smoking are in fact attracted by these kinds of imagery.
But they don't choose a brand for their first cigarette, come on. They choose to smoke a cigarette, to be cool, to be one of the crowd. They don't say, oh no, I think I'll go for, that brand because that's got a nicer packet than that brand.
Yes,
really?
Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely. It isn't just, young people, teenagers, are actually very brand conscious. Actually, it's anecdotal, but it's just by way of illustration. When I started smoking as a teenager, it was precisely the beautiful black packaging of the John Player Special that attracted me to it. I don't cite that as evidence.
And I suppose it can also be argued that even if their first cigarette is a Marlboro, they might decide to go for another brand later down the game and stick with that brand. So I suppose the packaging can be argued as being a part of that. So what's happening in Australia now, it seems, Michael, will hopefully deter young people from taking up the filthy habit, but it's not going to stop people already smoking.
The health minister and the anti-smoking lobby seem to be more confident that it'll de-glamorise it for the young people rather than convert the smokers. But I mean, it must have this effect of saying this country, the authorities don't sanction smoking, and so that must send out some kind of a message to people who do smoke. But obviously, probably more effective with those who are thinking about it and see the rotten pictures on these packets.
Robert, is there not a danger that young people take up smoking even more so now because it's such a bad thing to do, because it's so ill thought of? Because one of the reasons why young people take up smoking is to be a rebel. It's rebellion, isn't it?
It is one of the reasons why, but actually what we observe in this country, and I think it's true in Australia as well, in fact I know it's true in Australia, is that the rate of decline in smoking is greatest among the young people and lowest among the older people who are in fact addicted and find it harder to stop. So already the message is getting through, and young people are saying, actually, you know what? You can be a rebel without actually buying into the tobacco industry propaganda.
To put it in perspective, in Australia, in World War II, afterwards, 50% of Australians smoked. And then it wasn't until the 1970s and 80s when it sort of became obvious that there was a connection between smoking and health that it started to go down. But it's gone down now to 15%. So the overall trend is massively down. We do have something called the boomerang effect, which psychologists in Australia discovered, which the professor here has acknowledged, and that is that if you do have sometimes negative images can sometimes have a bounce back effect because they're just too horrible to contemplate. But my guess is that the young, sporty people are certainly not going to be won over to smoking more now than before.
Michael Dodd, journalist, Robert West, Professor of Health Psychology, thank you very much for coming in this evening.
Thank you.